Hey, Eric here. I just wanted to do a video of my overhaul, kind of wrap this up, some lessons learned. Um, I'll do kind of a list of a couple things off the top of my head, but then I'll also list them right here. Want to talk about my overhaul. I'll try and keep this short so I don't bore you guys with a bunch of stuff, but I have my new IO540, I should say overhauled IO540 by Watson Aero. This whole thing was required because of pitting on a cam, because the cam looked like this. And that was, from everything I can gather, it was because either the engine wasn't ran enough or the humidity of where it was too high. They didn't remove the fill cap to let that moisture out, something like that. And it was really sad because the rest of the engine worked great. But that being said, went through the overhaul with Watson Aero, just outside Atlanta. They did a great job. Engine's been running great. We're at about 25 hours right now, just getting ready to drain out the mineral and go to a standard oil. Overall, it's been running great. The power is incredible. It's, go figure, it's like a whole new engine. Couple things I want to share about lessons learned so that anyone else looking at doing an overhaul, they at least have a couple of things that I kind of went, dang, I wish I'd known that. One of the big ones is recognize it's a big expense. It just is going in. You're going to be somewhere between 40 and 80 for the engine. I know it's a big range, but it depends on what you're doing. 40 to 80 for the engine, plus all the costs associated with removal and reinstall. Some optional, some required. Plus, while playing is down for 3 to 6 months, you're probably gonna do some other things at the same time. So one of the biggest surprises for me was that I thought if I took the cost that it was to remove the engine and multiplied it by 2 or 3 for reinstall, that would be a good number to work with. Unfortunately, I wasn't even close. Part of that, or I should say a big part of that, was my own doing. I ran into an issue with baffling. I was going to get all new baffling. I ended up choosing not to do it. Hindsight, I should have. But I ended up not doing it because Airforms didn't actually have, their STC didn't cover my specific model. So it's just kind of this convoluted thing. So I thought, you know what, never mind, I'll just use the existing. Well, to put the old baffling on, I ended up paying my A&P to do it. Whereas if I had done new baffling, Watson Aero would have done it as part of the install. And the baffling is just harder to add after everything's done. So they had to come back and remove some stuff, put it back on. So just that alone cost me about $1,500 or $1,800 in labor. The baffling kit is about $1,800. So I could have got all new baffling for basically free. That was a big oversight on my part. The other part was all the costs associated that come with having an engine removed when it's reinstalled that you want to have done. So talk with my A&P, there was things like going through and replacing the main power leads. All the actual power, the 14-volt lines going from the ignition system to the block, the ground, all of those all need to be redone. You know, technically they were functioning as they were before, but since the engine was ripped apart, that's the right time to do it. That wire's not cheap, and it has to be soldered and everything else. So there's another $500 or $700. So you have that kind of stuff, and then there's other things that are exposed. The heat shield on my muffler, it was found to be cracked beyond repair. So I had to get a new one of those. That was $1,000, plus the time to reinstall it and go through all that because we ended up putting a used one in. So all of these little things added up, and I'll put a full ledger at the end of this. The other thing you want to make sure and take a look at when you're going through this and you're looking at overhaul shop, the kind of the last surprise for me was understanding what an overhaul is. And if you have a chance, watch the video I did with Watson Aero where we'll talk a lot about that. But one of the big parts was that an overhaul is just the power plant. And so that doesn't include all your accessories. So some shops will include accessory overhauls, others will not. I think it ends up being about a wash in price, but you just want to know what you're getting into. So it doesn't seem like it's big, but it adds up because you have, you know, the governor, and then you have the prop flush, and then you have the alternator, and then you're going to overhaul your mags, which you're supposed to do at the same time, and then new P leads, and all these other things start adding up, and it's $100 here, $800 there, And it adds up to a pretty significant number because it's so replicative. The only other thing I would say that as I was going through this, that I think that I could have done better was just better planning earlier on with my A&P and communicating with him exactly what my intent was. Because in the end, I ended up being delayed on install because of some avionics updates that we did, and I'll do that in a second video. But because of those avionics updates, he ended up having to do a bunch of cabling updates under the panel, and that ended up pushing him out about another week and a half. He didn't realize that we were doing that many updates. He didn't realize that there was so much removal going on. Here's a little clip of all the stuff we removed. And so putting all that together, it just kind of spiraled. And I think in the end, my number was, and I have to look at the final number, but it was around 75, 77K when we were said and done. We had roughly high 40s for the power plant, removal, reinstall, all that kind of stuff. That was, I want to say, about another 15K. And then we had all the panel stuff. I also did some new seats, did all new leather on all the seats. While they were down, I figured it was time. So I'll show a couple, well, I guess actually here's a couple shots of the seats. In regard to the power plant itself, yes, it's now working great. Watson Aero, I've had basically no problems with the engines. Just something to be aware of, that your thermocouples or your EGT probes on my power plant, they only have leads that are about a foot long. Then they're hooked together with screws to the existing thermocouple leads that go into my EI engine monitor. Well, as part of the overhaul, they took those out, obviously. They cleaned the jacket. But during that process, because they was so old, there was gunk in the actual connectors. And for those somewhat familiar with electrical, the amount of resistance on thermocouples is a very, very small number. And so because it's so small, it's very easily affected by any type of junk that ends up on those connectors. So I've had 2 EGT probes that were reading incorrectly. I needed to go through, we pulled the sleeves off where those are butt connected, pulled those sleeves off, cleaned the connectors, got the junk off of them, screwed them back together, and it solved the problem. So other than that, gosh, I'm trying to think of anything else I could share. Remember, you do want to do all new hoses. So that's a good thing to investigate at the same time. Like I said, you have all the flushes. Some people mentioned to me about doing things like the engine mount. Mine, because it's a retract, to do the engine mount, you then have to pull the gear apart. So decided to not do that. I did do a full clean, and then also just removed a lot of the other leftover junk. There was an old EGT probe from the single probe that was in there. There was a series of fittings and things along the firewall from old systems. My A&P removed all those, plugged all those holes. But overall, very, very happy with it. Very happy with the engine. Very happy with its performance. Would strongly recommend Watson Aero and James and his team. They do great work. And yeah, if you have any questions or anything I can answer for you, definitely post down below on our YouTube channel. And thank you, guys.